Okay, 3 o'clock, Thursday, week 1, COP. Well done. It gives me great delight to introduce you to this next discussion, this panel. As you can see, it's all about kind of scaling the opportunity for artificial intelligence. We're delighted to be here with the guests of Jesse, and we're loving the kind of format that you've got. My name is Dominic Warre. I'm an Executive Vice President at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's my honor and delight to guide us through the discussion today. I'll introduce our panel shortly, but as you know from all of the discussions that you have in this space, we have a rather curious moment, both in COP and in our lifetimes in terms of rapid technological change. In world of COP, a negotiation process that is tough and hard and has to work really quickly, which is not really what COP processes do, given where UNEP are now saying that we've got, a 46% reduction need in greenhouse gases by 2030 and upward of 50% by 2035. We get used to these numbers, but it's amazingly hard to try and turn that into not just a kind of regulation and hope that countries or businesses would do it, but into something, given the state of the economic times that we are in, something that actually is a commercial advantage for businesses, something that actually creates a competitive edge, drives down costs, improves efficiencies, creates new innovations, products and services, and reduces emissions. And that's the kind of double-edged kind of challenge which AI might offer. We can see it sweeping through many different business models and changing things completely. Can we not harness that opportunity in both the challenge of tackling these emissions so great, which we need to reduce so quickly in such a short time frame, but will that not also drive a whole wave of innovation, optimization, and efficiency in business enterprises or in systems? So that's the kind of space that we want to have the conversation in. Of course, there's another side to the AI challenge, and many of you, have picked up on that and noted it. And we will kind of get into those issues as well, because there's never only a clean shot at a win. There's always another side to the coin. So we'll explore a little bit about that as well. But let's get into the discussion. And it's a real delight to welcome our panel here. So Thomas, who is from the International Energy Agency based in Paris, and very much kind of looks at issues of innovation and technology and disruptive activities. And of course, the IEA recently launched its World Energy Outlook. So there's a whole bunch of data in there. There's some really interesting comparative statistics about different topics and such. We'll get into that. Antonia, who is head of partnerships and governance at Google, has been very much looking at driving kind of opportunity sets and the landscape for AI. We have Uday Khemka, who is the vice chair of Sun Group, one of the most innovative group of companies and collaboration in India. We'll hear a little bit more about that, but also with a very global outlook as well. And also delighted to have Enrique Dolabella, who is a director at the Ministry of Management and Innovation in Public Services. And I'm glad the screen came up because I wouldn't have remembered that one off the top of my head. But that means that we have not only kind of innovators from the commercial side and those who are very thoughtfully looking at this in terms of policy and regulatory landscapes, but we have government. And not only any government, but Brazil. And when we look from Azerbaijan to Belém, we have a very, very interesting journey ahead of us in terms of kind of seeking out what that innovation might look like. And is AI on the agenda for COP30? So that's a great panel for us to get stuck into the conversation. So let's go straight there. Thomas, I tried to set up a little bit some of the debates around AI and the kind of climate challenge, the energy transition challenge, the decarbonization challenge, the upsides and the downsides. Maybe you'd like to offer a few more kind of thoughts to set the scene for us.
Is this on? Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot, Dominic, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to the organizers for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here on behalf of the International Energy Agency. So indeed, this is something that we're looking at very closely. About 8 months ago, we launched a big project on energy and AI, and we'll be holding a global conference on energy and AI at our headquarters in December, and then publishing a special report in the first half of next year on this topic. So with that in mind, take what I'm saying as, our preliminary thinking as we convene leaders on this topic, business people, academics at our December conference, and then put together our special report next year. But at the IEA, we think about it in terms of 3 pillars. The first one is the demand challenge from data centers. So today, data centers account for about 1% of global electricity demand. That's not very much. But we do project that data center electricity demand will grow more rapidly in the future. The real challenge here is, though, the fact that data centers are very spatially concentrated. So they cluster around cities to be close to consumers for services where latency is a problem. And so this means that they put a strain on local electricity grids. So while it's 1% of electricity demand at the global level, it's over 25% in Ireland and approaching 30% in Virginia. So we don't expect at the global level data centers to become a major source of electricity demand, at least within the foreseeable future. But we do expect that there will be challenges at the local level for grid infrastructure, for generation capacity, and so on. We can come back to this topic. There's also a lot of interesting things going on in the space of procurement of clean electricity for data centers, but also how to integrate them into the grid in a more friendly manner. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is really around energy innovation. So we at the IEA have been stressing for a long time that we have the technologies that we need to start making a big difference on climate change. Those are wind power, solar PV, electric vehicles, and so on. But we have also highlighted that we need those technologies to be even more cost-effective and scalable, and we also need new technologies. So in our net zero study, we estimate that 1/3 of the emissions reductions needed to reach net zero need to come from technologies that are not commercially available today. And that's where we see tremendous opportunity from applying AI to the innovation challenge. There are studies out there which have shown that if you give scientists a generative AI tool that is designed to help with the process of material discovery, it can increase productivity by 40%. That's 40% new materials discovered without compared to those scientists that did not have access to the tool. So we see a lot of potential here. I think it needs to be better understood, and that's something that we're working on. And then the third pillar is really around optimizing today's energy infrastructure. So take the electricity grid, for example. The electricity grid is becoming more and more complex as we have variable renewables taking up more and more of generation, as we have the demand side becoming more variable with electric vehicles and heat pumps and air conditioning, all variable sources of load. And as we have more and more data being produced by the electricity system. So we see, for example, in the electricity sector, big potential for AI tools to be used to better project the output of variable renewables, to activate the demand side autonomously in order to respond to availability on the supply side, to conduct predictive maintenance, and so on. So we see big potential there. So that's just the sort of 3 pillars that we structure our thinking around.
Thomas, that's super helpful to kind of help everybody to bucket, where the IEA, if not others, kind of see the AI for climate issue. Just as a quick follow-up, when you have lots of governments are obviously kind of support and help to ask IEA to look at things. What are you sensing from the governments, if you like, I guess your sort of like your board, or are people getting more and more interested in this because you put out these pieces of work which are so thoughtful? Is it triggering kind of more and more interest from the government community about the potential or some of the other challenges that you mentioned in your first bucket?
There's huge interest, not just from governments, but also from the private sector and from civil society on this issue. I just want to give you one data point. So in our World Energy Outlook, we had a short section on electricity demand from data centers. We calculated what the share of the page count was. It was 5% of the total page count of this year's World Energy Outlook. We then looked at all of the English language press articles that came out referencing our World Energy Outlook. 1/3 of them mentioned data centers and AI, right? So that's just to give you a sense of the interest there. I would say across both the footprint side and the solution side, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the actual magnitude of the implications and what is going to determine that magnitude going forward. And so while we're able to talk in more concrete terms about data center electricity consumption today, there's still a huge amount of uncertainty about where that's going to go in the future. And so governments want to know more about that. Electricity system planners and operators want to know more than that, about that. On the solutions side, today I feel it's a bit more difficult to speak in very concrete terms about the solutions. But again, there's huge interest in, for example, designing government R&D programs so that they can leverage AI. But we need to look at, okay, what's the roadmap for doing that? What's the best technologies that we could look at? What are the most promising sectors? If AI accelerates, early stage innovation, how do we make sure that that's picked up towards commercialization? So in the face of that uncertainty, I think there's a big appetite for a more structured, comprehensive analysis. You can almost call it an AI roadmap for the energy sector, which is what the IEA is aiming to do with our conference and our special report.
Super, thanks, Thomas. That's just a brilliant statistic. I love the way we looked at the page count of AI in the World Energy Outlook and then all the references for it. That's a super metric. Gives us a little bit of an insight into kind of how you track the uptake of the World Energy Outlook in IEA in Paris. That's a perfect segue, Antonio, and perhaps to you. You've got kind of one of the jobs that probably everybody who wants to grow up would love, Global Director of Sustainability, Partnership and Engagement at Google. You've been looking at this for a while now, I think, kind of, several months. So it'd be fascinating to kind of share, what you're identifying, both from your work generally and from Google particularly, about some of the potentially more commercial opportunities that can help tackle climate through AI, and maybe, given the topic of the discussion, some of the challenges you're identifying about how to scale these opportunities.
Super. Well, first, great to be here. Thank you, Dominic, and thanks to everybody for better. Yours works. Good when technology works. It's a great pleasure to be here again, and thank you, Dominic, and thanks to everybody for joining us for this discussion. Of course, I think we're incredibly excited, but also humble about the potential of AI for climate, as well as ensuring the responsible management of AI as well. So as you mentioned, we have been thinking about and looking at the opportunity side of AI for climate for quite a while. Actually, before COP last year, we published a report which tried to really explore these opportunities in partnership with BCG. And of course, we like data. As Thomas was saying, it's really important to look at the data of this potential, but also the applications and use cases that we think can scale. So what the report first tried to lay out was an estimate of what do we actually think this can achieve for us globally. And what it found was that we think, that if all of the known applications available to today scale, that AI could enable up to a 10% mitigation potential by 2030. What does that mean? What are the kinds of solutions and applications that we're talking about, and what will it take to scale? I think is really the question that we're discussing and asking ourselves today. So in a way, we think about the unique capabilities of AI. What can AI do that wasn't possible before, that will really help us fast track the climate challenge? Of course, I will also say in tandem with all of the other actions that we need to drive, right? AI is not a silver bullet. We need the policies. We need a lot of different things to come together to shift the system. But what we know is that AI is really good at bringing together and processing incredible amounts of information and providing that that information such that ideally actions can take place. So it's translating vast amounts of information into action. So just as a very simple example of that, Google is building a range of different tools, products that really brings these capabilities to life. One is eco-friendly routing. Some of you might have seen this in your Google Maps platform, which if you're looking to go, to wherever you're trying to go, we will, if it's not already the fastest route, give you an option to take what we call a more fuel efficient route. Again, leveraging a lot of AI data analysis processing to give you the alternative that will actually enable you to reduce your emissions. So again, it's giving you information that can enable you to reduce your own personal emissions footprint. And what we found is that since launching this feature, we have equivalently taken about 650,000 cars off the road. So real impact from basically AI enabling actionable information to be provided real time to people that are making decisions on a daily basis. A second area is optimization. I think for those who have been thinking about working on climate, the IEA, I used to work there as well many years ago, for years has been saying energy efficiency optimization is free. It's the lowest cost solution. Why have we not been able to actually deliver on energy efficiency? There's a lot of transaction costs. There's many actors along the value chain. But actually, AI is one of those tools that, again, has come into the system now that has been able to help us, I think, in a sense, take away those transaction costs of delivering energy efficient outcomes. So we really have an opportunity to optimize our energy systems, to optimize processes as well. So another just example of that I'll highlight is a solution that in partnership with American Airlines and Breakthrough Energy, our Google research team built for the aviation sector, Contrails. So Contrails, and I think I'd be curious to know how many people in this room know the statistic, because I've worked on climate change for a long time, as many of you have. How many, other than the Google people, the aviation sector, contrails, those white plumes that you see in the sky behind an airplane. Just a pop quiz. How many of you think that this represents, let's say, more than under 10% of the emissions of the aviation sector, the global warming impact? So quite a few hands. How many of you think that it represents under 30%? A lot of people. So it is responsible for, just the plumes in the sky is responsible for about 35% of the global warming impact of the aviation sector. And of course, there's a lot of work happening on sustainable aviation fuel as a key transition fuel for the aviation sector. But what our research found is that actually by leveraging AI and figuring out what it is that causes the creation of contrails, that they could create models that actually get integrated into the platforms of the pilots, that from the beginning just avoid the creation of contrails. And the initial pilots found that it has been successful in actually mitigating about 50% of contrails creation. And again, if you take one application like that, easily integrated into existing systems, immediate in terms of its impact, you can see real change happening based on existing processes, existing technology. So again, the question is, how do we scale? We know this is possible. We know the aviation sector has targets to reach. So these are the types of solutions that we think have real potential. The last kind of quick area that I'll mention is around prediction. So we know, unfortunately, that climate change is upon us today, right? We wish it wasn't. We wish that we had addressed this challenge many years ago, but that is the reality that people around the world face. And so how can we leverage AI, again, these unique capabilities to make the job of actually predicting and preventing the impacts of climate change on people around the world much more effective? So equally quick example, which is scaling, I think as a positive sign, is a solution called Flood Hub, which again, our research team has partnered with the World Meteorological Organization and other partners around the world to effectively enable up to 7 days in advance prediction for flooding events, riverine flooding events. If you can do that, then you can provide information to people who might be affected by those floods to enable them to get out of harm's way. And in partnership with .org, our philanthropic arm as well, partnering with organizations to actually bring financing to those people before the flooding events happen to equally enable them to prepare as well. So all of these, let's say, applications, I think we're seeing really promising examples, really interesting use cases that, again, leverage that unique capability of AI, the ability to process information bring complex data together, but also provide it for action. We're really excited about all of this. And I think the conversation and where we're at in this discussion now is how do we achieve scale? How do we reach that 10%? And really, it's going to require partnership with many of you in the room.
Brilliant, Antonio. Thank you so much. As just a wealth of great examples in there. I love the middle piece where you talk about just the optimization thing, and I hadn't ever made that link, but all of us who worked on this for some time, all of those kind of low-hanging fruit reports about energy efficiency and such, and here comes something that can perhaps unlock it. So I guess just as a follow-up, if that one seems so obvious, and any boardroom would be great. It's not just chipping away at the 10% of emissions. It is also saving us money. Is it just because people aren't aware of the products or the services that are out there yet, or it's a disruptive approach to kind of current management systems? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say that the first good sign as we talk with different other private sector players is that there's a significant focus on actually leveraging these technologies and integrating them, because as you said, it is also a cost-saving reality, is that optimization will by definition help make business processes faster and often also save carbon emissions. So I would say that the journey is happening. There is a big skilling effort that also needs to happen. So bringing awareness and understanding of the solutions, helping build the capabilities and skills across the business community, but also the public sector, which I think we'll hear from in a minute as well, to be able to actually scale these technologies and solutions, apply them for optimization. But certainly I would say that the journey has begun.
Oh, that's interesting, a skilling kind of issue to be able to kind of harness and use. So that's a perfect segue. Thanks. Enrique, Director of the Ministry of Management and Innovation in Public Services. That's almost the most perfect job spec and ministry for this conversation. So thank you for joining us. I know you're all massively busy in the Brazilian delegation, both here at COP29 and moving forward. So really, really grateful for your time. But I guess you're already hearing some things in the panel that are triggering some thoughts as you're trying to look at this both domestically in Brazil, but also harnessing this international potential, about 10% win maybe in climate reduction. So reflections from your perspective would be really, really interesting. Thank you.
Well, first reflection is thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Thomas and Antonio, for your inputs. First action is to cross over some things that I had prepared to say because they've already said it. But yeah, thanks for being here. And your contributions are great. And they are very good illustrations on what we can optimize. And I was particularly happy when you mentioned the increase of capacities and capabilities of private sector, of public sector, of civil society stakeholders, especially relating to responses to extreme weather events, climate events. These are critical. They do create a lot of damage, and the earlier that we can anticipate them, the better our response can be, and we can save a lot of lives, a lot of resources, economic, human, capital, and so on. So we also foresee that this is critical. And in order to do that, we're talking, in the end of the day, about a coordination problem. And traditionally, of course, technology has taken a more prominent role in the coordination process, but governments have been a key stakeholder in coordinating these responses and increasing the capabilities of governments through training. AI is having a massive impact on training at all levels of government, because sometimes federal level works at an all right competency, but climate change impact is happening on the ground. So we really must increase capacity at state level, at municipality level, and AI is already doing this. This morning we were with Apolitical discussing exactly how we can leverage these technologies. So the state-of-the-art practices can actually reach those people who are working at ground level. Furthermore, as Antonio said, AI has this wonderful capacity of organizing and processing huge amounts of data. And although our political practices, our policies must be oriented, must be guided by values, they're guided by politics, first and foremost, but they must be oriented by evidence. And we're all hopeful that this streamlining, the mainstreaming of AI will help us gather, process, and make available the best possible evidence for those decision makers who have to make, decisions on the snaps. For that, Brazil is organizing a very important initiative, which is finally organizing a national data infrastructure to manage to integrate all data from the different ecosystems, social ecosystems, territorial ecosystems, infrastructure ecosystems data. So our policies, we're not rowing in different directions. We can, in this case, contribute so we can all go in the same way. And that's critical to optimize, that's critical to make it clear that we're all in this together and sharing the same problems, sharing the same solutions. And just as a final explanation, just as a final thing, we are in the process of restructuring our IT architecture around digital public infrastructures. That was made explicit in the new presidential decree establishing the new national digital strategy. And why is this important? It's because digital public infrastructures, first of all, they were thought of as a ways of making processing data and making them available to whoever wanted to use them. But we have found out they're doing more than that. They're actually engaging first or second gear into other policy-making processes. So just as an explanatory example, I work at the Rural Environmental Registry, which is responsible for collecting environmental data of each rural property. And of course, that's important. We need to know where deforestation is taking place. We need to look out where forest recovery is taking place. Our NDC is based on the recovery of 12 million hectares. But how to do that? It's not just establishing a law and telling rural owners to do it. We have to create the financial incentives as well. So because we're making this data available and readily available, it's actually made easier for the financial sector to incorporate this data into their processes of analyzing credit, of analyzing loans and insurance from the rural owners. So this is a very clear example on the sort of impact that we can have.
Enrico, it's fascinating to hear you speak about this from the perspective of government, because often we think about optimization in business processes and business efficiency. I really appreciated your point about the levels of government and the capacity building to harness the possibilities of the opportunity at local level as well as at federal level. And also that made me think, as your government leans into an international process, I suppose it's the same challenge. I mean, there might be richer countries with more human capacity who could harness the AI potential better, and other countries which have less skills and capacity who, the common call is, we need more money. But actually, if there's there's opportunities to be much more efficient and optimized in things, but there's no capacity, it might feel also like we're getting left behind as other countries can move forward faster with this new technology.
It's still a bet. We don't know whether it's going to increase the gap or diminish the gap. But what we do know is that there are actions that we must undertake to use this technology advancement to decrease the gap between the countries, of increasing the capacity of the countries who are further behind so they can absorb all the potential that's coming from it. And we are in this together. This is a global challenge. And for that, there must be a lot of cooperation.
Super interesting. I can see angles for the next World Energy Outlook here in terms of the equity, at a sort of international level of applying innovative technological solutions like AI. Uday, some of these conversations already might be sparking some thoughts in your mind. I know as you look across your collection of companies in Sun Group, I mean, you're driving an enormous amount of innovation in mobility systems and energy systems, both domestically and internationally. And you've been looking quite seriously about the commercial opportunities for AI to not only reduce emissions, have clean systems, but also to create value and opportunities. So be very, very interesting to hear your take on AI for climate and overcoming any barriers that you can see for scaling.
Well, Dominic, thank you, as all the other speakers have said, for having me on this, but also a spectacular panel. And I can leave now, everything's been said. But it is brilliant to hear what progress, Antonio and I were talking about before this, has been made even in 12 months on this subject. We are an Indian foundation, and if you don't mind, I might use the philanthropic lens first and come back to a corporate lens on this. We're the oldest Indian foundation to focus on climate, which we've been doing since Rio in '92. And the reason why over the last 2 years we've gone deeply into this subject is the point you made right at the beginning, that we're just not moving fast enough. And I loved Antonio's point about 10%. That's huge. And if we can actually achieve that, that's a big contribution. So I would say there are 3 lenses that I would bring that try and tie together some of the points that were made. One is the systemic scale of what we're all trying to do. It's not that there isn't goodwill. It's just that everything is transforming. Energy system, the transport system, the building system. And there's a convergence, as we all know, between these systems. You know, where does transport stop and energy begin, or buildings stop and energy begin? Everything's integrating in a tremendous manner so that, for example, vehicles are storage systems for the grid, or, you know, you can't build buildings without thinking about carbon absorption, but also as generation points. And it seems to me that that is creating a tremendous need for the point you were making on coordination. The coordinative nature of these transformations, these decarbonization transformations, are not just in one area. How do we innovate a new material? But how do we make sure that the entire system of power, transportation, building, and so forth integrate and are scaled? This is not easy. And we as a foundation have been working with institutional finance, Dominic, as you know, sovereign wealth funds and pension funds for decades. And institutional investors are really scared. And we've seen with Stern Songway 1, 2, and 3 that we need an extra $1 trillion of investment in the global south. It's not going to happen if you have both emerging market risk and then the systemic risk that's happening on top of it. Luckily, a lot of these new energy transformations are accompanied by data sources. So just as we integrate energy systems or building systems or transport systems to each other, it's generating this super flow of data, which is then being used by smart people like Google to come up with amazing solutions. So the first point I'd make is the integration of systems. And the fact that systemically all these things have to be integrated is also, to your point, a great benefit for financial systems, which can then de-risk predictively, not just wind electron predictions, but also financial predictions of system risk can be diminished dramatically by the predictive power of AI. And that's really important to countries like mine that need to attract huge amounts of capital. The third kind of fragmentation I would point to in system integration is the fact that these domains have a cultural problem. And Thomas, you and I were talking about this at the beginning before the session, that you take power. Utilities are traditionally pretty conservative people. They don't necessarily understand AI. And you know, a lot of AI companies are making tons of money doing other things, dating apps and e-commerce, and may not be as focused on the power system. Yet, in the last year, I think you'll agree with me, there's been a flourishing of startups in these areas for the first time. And that creates an ecosystem that we can start to harness, and that helps perhaps bridge that cultural gap. So it seems to me that these 3 fragmentations and these 3 system responses, accompanied by some of the, I know something you're very passionate about, Dominic, which is looking at the scope 3 integration, both upstream and downstream, and what that can do. I'm trying to make the point, I guess, in a slightly ineloquent way, that there's a system shift that data and AI can solve above and beyond any one problem. And that creates, just as you may improve the productivity of factory, if you improve the productivity of the entire supply chain or an entire mode of consumption or business models, we are seeing that in our businesses that we innovate with. For example, we have created India's leading infrastructure business for EV, EV infrastructure business with battery swap. And that means that we control all the batteries across the country in this system. But we get huge amounts of data, which allow us to think about generation points, storage points, and microfinance. Just a small illustration of the point. And then I would say just that what we've done, therefore, as a foundation, because I'm wearing a foundation lens, is to create an initiative called GRAIL, Green AI Learning, with universities and corporate partners around the world. GRAIL for power, GRAIL for mobility, GRAIL for materials innovation, so forth. And we are trying to bring together that into a summit in the spring, focused on these downstream solutions. We invite everyone to be part of, and giving the new UK government a chance to position themselves in this field with the Turing Centre in London and various universities and so forth, to really try and move the field forward on solutions, working with all of you. And we'd just love to try and be a small part of that a shift towards a very, very aggressive solution mindset to achieve Antonia's 10%.
Thanks, Uday. It was very eloquent. It wasn't ineloquent at all. And there's so many things in there. And your illustration about the kind of scale of operations with battery swap and the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers and it illustrates the system opportunity across multiple states or a large continental economy like India, and the amount of data that is just being created that could create optimizations of we haven't even begun to think what they could be, but pretty amazing. And I love Antonio. In fact, it's become Antonia's 10%. The AI kind of prize that's up for grabs. So we got kind of a sort of a smaller second half of this discussion, and perhaps just to focus on the second half of the title, overcoming those barriers to scale. There's a strong feeling here of things are moving fast and things have to move fast. So if we're going to do this again in 12 months' time, and we'll be in your country in Brazil to have this conversation, could I be cheeky to say, well, what kind of barrier would you like to have seen overcome within these 12 months to kind of have moved this topic along a little bit? And I'll let you kind of just ponder that a while, because I'll try and think of one myself. I think that what is appealing here is finding a kind of a quick win that everyone really understands. And I really like that optimization piece, because you mentioned about scope 3. And we have lots of kind of companies in our membership who it's a collaboration challenge. The data has to move between different suppliers, and that's pretty tough. And you can almost see an application here of smoothing away a lot of friction and revealing an awful lot of information about how, for example, a carbon product footprint would be assembled, and give a really accurate identification of upstream scope 3. And cracking a nut like that, within a short period of time and bringing it to Belém, which is something that both emerging and developed countries can work on, because these are global supply chains, I think could be quite exciting. So hopefully that's given you a chance to have a think as well. But maybe, Thomas, I mean, you'll, I guess, be doing lots of research at IEA on this, so maybe there's an identification of key barriers, or maybe there's some policy solutions that you're hoping to develop.
I wanted just to pick up on this issue of AI and the digital divide, AI applications for developing countries, because I think there's rightly a concern that AI should not exacerbate existing digital divides. But I also think we need to be more optimistic. We need to think about what solutions that are specific to developing countries AI could help contribute to solving. And this is something that we're doing at the IEA. There's, as part of our research, there is a specific arm on solutions to challenges faced by developing countries. I want to give you just one example of what we've done. We worked together with a researcher at MIT to develop a model that can predict from satellite images whether buildings in sub-Saharan Africa are connected or not to the electricity grid. And if they're not connected, what would be their annual electricity consumption, their willingness and capacity to pay. And a utility can use that to develop a more efficient electrification plan, because they can say, okay, we can go into these areas quickest. We can get customers who are not connected but are able and willing to pay, and who would have an electricity consumption that would make the investment costs worthwhile. And we can get started in that way, and then build out the network to other households. Of course, when we talk about barriers to scale, that's a model that we've developed with MIT. It's public, but then there's the question of how do you transfer its use? How do you give people the information, the knowledge, so that they can use it and start integrating into their plans? And that's where I feel so depressed that you've taken the best acronym that we could possibly have come up with. GRAIL is absolutely brilliant. I think the biggest barrier is communicating the possibilities to people and starting to share solutions. So I think that's the challenge that we face at the IEA, is trying to put on paper some sense in a structured and comprehensive way of what this could mean and how to unlock it.
Thanks, it's super thoughtful. I'm loving to find out more about that collaboration with MIT. I mean, if one of those came through in the next kind of 10 or so months, wouldn't that be cool? Antonia, if we were to kind of regroup in 12 months, what kind of win would you have liked to have seen, or barrier that was overcome?
Well, I suppose you see the word partnership in my title probably for a reason, because I genuinely believe that actually to scale a lot of these solutions, the key is really partnership, but also working in partnership pretty quickly as well, right? So we don't have, you know, Belém is it is a year away, but really that comes quickly. So how can we fast track some of the collaborations that we know have incredible potential of really pragmatic solutions, right? So I talked about contrails. How do we partner, and we are working to partner with more airlines, with more parts of the sector, with governments as well, to help incentivize the use of these types of solutions so that they can really quickly actually deploy the impact that we're seeking to have. Partner with cities also on trying to scale some of the optimization potential that we see. I didn't talk about another project that we have, Project Greenlight, which is really simply about traffic light optimization, right? Simple. Again, it's like the amazing thing is that using AI, mapping traffic flows, and literally shifting relatively simple things like traffic lights, you can save up to 10% of emissions and make your driving experience that much better and less frustrating. So right now that's available in 12 cities, but how do we make that available in many more cities? Again, because it's actually helping individuals, it's making your journey a little bit more pleasant, but it's also mitigating emissions in those cities as well. So really for me, it's partnerships is really at the core, but also how do we do this really quickly? And I think that's where the convergence of energy and the convergence of these discussions becomes really important, and working with you all to make that happen. So I suppose that's my vision and goal.
Oh, that's amazing. This is going rather well. We've got a really good example that IEA has created with MIT and looking for partnership. I loved the traffic light optimization one, but the contrail thing of having more partners, there's sort of really specific things where people can see a win and then build from that with confidence to other things. Enrique, what in 12 months' time, if we came back, would you like to have seen that has been progressed, or a barrier that's been overcome?
Again, they've already said what I was going to say, so I have to be creative once more. First of all, this is an explanation process, but we can't wait that long. So we really have to increase the power of this exponential function, because we've got to hurry up. Really, we really can't wait. So I believe that what really induces adoption is the quality of the solution. We've seen so many solutions that no one had ever thought of, and then all of a sudden, in 3 months' time, it's spread around the world. Especially now in the stage we're living in, Uber's a quite clear example. Tinder's a clear example, isn't it? But in the case, we need to build the partnerships so that we can unlock the ingenuity of the private sector. We can unlock the capacities of these AI dedicated, wonderful human beings towards our common problems. So we need to really lower the barriers between governments and the private sector to have clear partnerships, common goals, so we can all strive to achieve our shared purpose.
I think we're building something in this little conversation about lowering the barriers to partnership to unlock some of these very, very practical innovations which are there for the taking. And we've got 12 months, as you say. We haven't got time to kind of sit and talk. But this sounds like there's something. There's a nice channel. I know your government's quite keen on this sort of broad topic for COP. But to try, I guess, to Antonia and Thomas's challenge, make it as specific as possible.
I'm actually preparing the stage for next year's COP. It's right here next to Google. We've been talking to them about a potential partnership, and I think that what we really must do also is focus on the jobs that are really hard to do by humans.
Yeah.
Right. Because why is that? Because those are the jobs that are not being done enough nowadays. So in our case specifically, monitoring of forest cover, automating this process, monitoring forest recovery. We're still using technology that was developed 10, 15 years ago, get the satellite data, create the database from that. It's still an arduous process. And AI, come on, it's custom made for this sort of thing. And reporting, verification, providing the right incentives, leveraging the financial sector, leveraging every single production process around better updated data. This is, if we had a reason for it, if we had a job for AI, this would be it. And another one would be, it's very hard to reach the people who are on the ground. They're not always updated about what the best practices are. Yet, we know that we can, through adoption of AI tools, facilitate this process of them having access to simple proceedings, simple process, simple techniques that have been subsidized by AI. And AI also really facilitates adoption. It facilitates dissemination of best practices around the world. So whenever someone has a great case study, put it up on a platform, and this can be easily adopted to different environments, different cultures, different ecosystems. So I think this will also be a quick win.
Excellent. Antonia, Thomas, I think we've got a customer here with a big hairy problem to solve in a very short period of time, but some very, very interesting kind of thoughts on please help us move quick and fast and at scale. Uday, last word is yours on this. So if we were to come back in 12 months, from your perspective, what barrier would you have liked to have seen as overcome to get some of these ideas or opportunities to scale?
Reflecting on what you had asked, my mind immediately went to the wedges and the big carbon solutions. And I thought, well, it should be about demand, all the energy efficiency stuff we'd framed, or how do we get coal? How do we get renewable energy? And then I thought, no, let me be honest about what I really think. What I really think is time is against us. And there are going to be huge numbers of wonderful ideas, to your point, around the world. What we really need to do is create an architecture, a software and convening organized architecture by which the best ideas can be collaborated upon and funded super fast. And that's an architecture that we had suggested at Grail, bringing together universities, other sources, great companies like Google, all these great ideas, collaborative space, all the venture players, all the government grant players into a collaborative community. So the tyranny of awe is not something we can afford when the timing is so fast. We could have done it in that sequential way. I don't think we can.
Oh, that's amazing. So here's the thing. What if we kind of like took some of those thoughts and came back in 12 months to see how we got on? Because that, when you were speaking, I don't know if you noticed, but at least 2 of the panel were writing that down in terms of that kind of platform. So there we are. Can you join me in a round of applause for an excellent and thoughtful panel? Thank you, Uday. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Antonia. Thank you, Enrique. And these folks will be around for a bit, so I'm sure there'll be some questions from you. But I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and thanks to the organizers at Jesse for hosting us so beautifully. With that, we'll close the discussion. Thank you.
Happy days. Cool. Yes. Oh, yeah, I'd love to. That's really nice.
I'm actually London next I have your number. Let me put it to you. Okay, then thanks so much.
Dominic is central all of this.
One.
Hi, everyone. If you're here for this session, feel free to take a seat. We're running a tight ship for time today, so get comfortable. Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Barron. I'm the Interim Director of Climate Action at the Centre for Public Impact. Don't worry, interim doesn't mean I'm on probation. It means my boss is on parental leave. It's my absolute joy to welcome you to our session this afternoon, AI for Action, Climate Solutions. So we're going to be upbeat, positive, and solution-oriented, which I'm thrilled about. So in this session, we start from the understanding that ambitious and innovative approaches are what we absolutely need for the transformative climate action we're seeking. And in the previous session, we heard about some of the innovations in the public and the private sector, which are using AI, managing AI's energy needs, and supporting responsible AI development. In this session, we will hear how AI, combined with human ingenuity, collaborative relationships, scientific expertise, and community buy-in, is already playing a critical role in accelerating solutions that mitigate carbon emissions, supporting communities and individuals adapt to the impacts of climate change, and building functional capabilities in modelling and research to support the transition to a resilient, low-carbon future. So no pressure, panel, but that's what we're going to cover. Many of these successful collaborations are working across sectors, as I'm sure many of you know, and they're doing extraordinary things. And our non-profit partners here are leading the way in some of that. So I am lucky to be sitting here today with Dr. Michal Nachmani, the founder and CEO of Climate Policy Radar, Dr. Elchin Jafarov, Senior Research Scientist at the Woodwell Climate Research Centre, Tom Matinje, Senior Manager for External Relations at Give Directly, Carolina Urmineta, Program Director of Waste and Circular Economy at the Global Methane Hub, and Kevin Breggy, Head of Climate and Sustainability at google.org. Now, as a bit of a teaser, before you hear from these talented voices, I'm going to give you a little bit of context as to why google.org kindly let me in my very loud suit hold a microphone for a few minutes here, and share with you a little bit about my role and why this work is close to my organisation's mission as well. So at the Centre for Public Impact, we work with those in and around government to embrace complexity, prioritise learning and value relationships. We're a global non-profit of systems thinkers, designers, facilitators and project managers. In the Climate Action team, we focus on mainstreaming climate across organisations and government departments, reimagining community and local government relationships, doing innovative climate financing, and improving how information and tech, especially AI, is used for transformative climate action. We've partnered with google.org for a few years now, collaborating on a variety of really interesting projects, including the google.org Impact Challenge on climate innovation, of which the Woodwell Climate Research Centre and the Global Methane Hub were successful participants, the AI Opportunity Fund, and most recently, designing an ecosystem approach to ensure that diverse expertise, relationships, and existing coordination mechanisms for AI can be optimised for real-world impact. So given my organisation's focus on impactful collaborations for transformative climate action, I'm absolutely thrilled to dive into this discussion. So to start with, panellists, please tell us more about your organisations, the aims of your organisations, and more about yourselves, sorry, and how you or your organisation is using AI to tackle a climate challenge.
It is on now.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Michal Nachmani. I'm the founder and chief exec of Climate Policy Radar, and also one of the principal co-authors on the AI for Climate Mitigation Roadmap, which is being launched tomorrow, commissioned by the Japanese government. There's about 350 pages of rich solutions in there on how AI can help mitigation. There's probably another 350 pages to be written on how AI can help adaptation. for monitoring methane, inventing new materials, optimizing grid, and so that we can upload more renewables to the grid, making sure that we know when the clouds float over the over our fields or over our solar panels, so we know how to expect that. And it's so rich and it's incredible, the ability to take so many data points and model them and bring them and create new knowledge that can help us make decisions. But that is the point. Whoever we are, we need to make decisions, because climate change can be solved by two main levers. We need to make better policy, and we need to move money from the old economy to the new economy. And when we think about AI, we often think about the solutions, and we think less about how it is powered, how it powers new decisions. So Climate Policy Radar operates in that space. We started by saying, okay, policymakers need to read a lot of documents so they can see who's done what already and what works, and who's tried something successfully and what can we learn and improve on. But policy documents tend to be, they're about 80 pages on average of very technical language, often in multiple languages. So we don't read them very carefully. And when we do, we usually read the ones that we have at our fingertips. And when we do, we read the ones that are only in our language. And that reduces the ability to incorporate knowledge and into our decision making. And of course, we only trust the ones that we know that are safe, and the ones that we heard from our consultants or our trusted advisors. So what do? We bring in all of the things that people need to read. There's about 5,000 laws, policies, strategies, action plans. That's about 500,000 pages of documents. There's more NDCs and corporate transition plans and climate litigation cases where corporates and governments are being taken to court for accountability. There's corporate disclosures. There's project finance documents. All of those need to be read, because at the end of the day, decision makers read text and make sense of it. So putting it in one place, making it all machine readable, attacking it with all of the AI weaponry that we can. So auto-translating it, saying, how can we replace the control find with more sophisticated language tools, summarizing it, being able to answer questions, and being able to bring it to the decision makers so they can answer the questions that help them. What are some of the green subsidies that are being deployed in sub-Saharan Africa? What is happening in transportation sector in Southeast Asia, and how can we improve that? What are the impacted groups, and how do extreme weather events in certain areas, what is the policy response to that? So that's what we do. We do that in a combination of working with, of course, our giant team of, not giant in terms of their intelligence rather than their size. We're not-for-profit after all, of engineers and data scientists, in collaboration with the domain experts, because we need to translate the state of what's happening in these corridors and the language and the domain specificity into those large language models, and the ability to actually understand what it is that we're doing. So that's it for now. On to you, Elchin.
Can you hear me? Is it working? It doesn't look like it. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Elchin Jafarov. I'm a scientist at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. My colleagues are in the room, so I want to make sure that I'm not saying something wrong. So I'm just going to read it from, my phone to make sure that, we're on the same page. So the Woodwell Climate Research Center conducts science for solution at nexus of climate, people, and nature. We partner with leaders and communities for just, meaningful impact to address climate crisis. That's sort of the main definition of what we do, and I'm going to unpack it more. So we have multiple departments. We focused on in the Arctic, in tropics, water, carbon, and risk. These are sort of 5 departments that we have in at our institution, and all departments explore different areas of the entire globe. And of course, like the carbon budget is the sort of the main topic that we are super interested in, and a lot of people are invested in this topic, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Arctic, because my main expertise is in the Arctic, and Arctic is more closer to my heart. So in the Arctic, we specifically look at the permafrost, and the permafrost is a frozen ground that's been there for centuries, that accumulated a lot of carbon. So currently, we estimate that if all that carbon is going to release as a result of thawing permafrost, warming soils, it's 2 times more carbon stored in the permafrost soil than currently in the atmosphere. So eventually, all that carbon might end up in the atmosphere and might be setting off the projections that we have now. Let's say we're shooting for 1.5 degrees, but with permafrost, that's going to be higher than that. That is absolutely for sure. So that said, we are looking into that, and we are studying permafrost on a broader scale, on a circumpolar scale. There's different aspects of it. So one aspect is that I'm super interested is the predictions and forecasting. Can we forecast permafrost? Can we forecast how fast it's going to thaw? Can we forecast the corresponding disturbances? Can we forecast the frequency of the disturbances? So what are the disturbances? Disturbances are the events that basically disturb the system and make it thaw, in this case, much faster, which in this case could be, so for example, forest fires. So forest fires, they burn the top part of the vegetation, right? Trees and shrubs and moss. So, but what most important is that severe fire burn a lot of moss. When they burn moss, then they trigger faster permafrost degradation because moss serves as an insulative layer for the permafrost. It basically protects it. Once it's removed, it's exposed to faster thaw. So that's one thing. Another thing is that what we're seeing right now is accelerated of melting of the ground ice. And when that ice melts, the soil subsides, and then more little ponds and lakes occur as a result of that. So that has a positive effect overall, again, on permafrost and on thawing permafrost at much faster pace. So that said, going to the AI technologies that we've been using, and I'm amazed to be here and to listen to all these innovations that's been implemented into the industry. We wish we would go at that pace, but unfortunately, we are adopting it, but not at that fast pace as you guys might think. So there are a few things that we are implementing at the moment. One thing is we're doing image recognition by basically like looking at the satellite images and identifying those areas where we see this dramatic, abrupt thaw. So we're identifying those areas, and then we're counting how many of them and then what the frequencies are. So that's one of the applications of the AI that we're using constantly. The other application that we want to go to is the doing forecasting and predictions using AI. So we've been impressed with the Google DeepMind model that recently they published a paper on it's the model called GraphCast that does the predictions / forecasting of the weather. So they're doing predictions of the weather by using the AI model. So why AI model in this case is better than the typical numerical models that has like a built-in physics in it. It runs much faster. We're not talking about the training time, right? So like it produces the results much faster, and if those results are quite accurate, then that's really a nice opportunity for us to get to the, to the results and to have a lot and to test a bunch of scenarios and then to have a lot of data for the analysis. So that's great. But like the implementing this technology, it requires a lot of expertise. And unfortunately for us, it's not all that straightforward. We wish to have like sort of taking, from the shell, methods that are available to us so we can just, plug our data and start using it. And the other part of it is the data. So you can imagine that in our case, the data is limited. We're working in the Arctic. Conditions are extremely harsh. Most of the time it's cloudy. Satellite cannot really see what's going on the ground. So we have to use different satellites. synthetic aperture radar, and some other techniques, but then those techniques also have their own limitations. In terms of measurements, we have like really, our network is really sparse. And like the biggest part of the area, that's Russia, it's not well covered. So all these complications makes our process extremely hard and complicated if we want to do the upscaling of the results that, for example, if we want to upscale the fluxes that we have in the northern circumpolar, then we really have to rely on a few points. So our goal is to increase number of those observations, but then, that's why we're using models. So with using models, we can really have a higher coverage and increase the number of observations. And we're hoping that with using AI, combining all these techniques, we can really get there. Sorry, it took me longer, but there's a lot to say.
A lot to say indeed. Hi, my name is Tom. I work for GiveDirectly, and GiveDirectly says what it says on the tin. We give cash directly to people living in poverty and affected by climate disasters. We are driven by, we stand on a wealth of evidence that shows that people that have been affected by climate disasters know their context best. They understand opportunities, they understand the challenges. What they lack is the capital to operationalize that knowledge. And therefore, we deliver cash across a broad spectrum of the climate agenda. So looking at adaptation, response, and recovery. Two problems where artificial intelligence comes in handy. Understanding that in a lot of the contexts that we work in, taking us back, where do we work? We work in 10 countries in Africa, Bangladesh, and the United States. And this also brings another opportunity to marry disaster and cash. Disasters don't discriminate. They will affect people in Malawi, in Nigeria, in Bangladesh, and in the US. And cash is also the great equalizer. Cash, its versatility means that it is effective in Malawi, in Nigeria, in Bangladesh, and in the United States. And this is where it's a match of bringing cash in the disaster space. The two things that we employ AI for is understanding when to disperse and deliver cash, and to whom to disperse and deliver cash. Going to when. Evidence shows that when you deliver cash in advance of a shock occurring, people are able to safeguard their assets and to be able to proactively build their resilience, resulting in much lower losses when the disaster strikes. But also evidence has shown that they recover much more quickly. So they get back to work quickly, they get back to business much more quickly. And therefore there is a very strong economic case for delivering cash in advance of the shock occurring. Where does AI come in? So looking at climate informatics, looking at modeling when and how severe floods are going to affect and where they're going to hit most, allows us to be able to pre-position cash so that when we know that a flood is going to occur, 7, 5, 3 days, we're able to disperse the cash to those communities, and they're able to take the necessary measures to make sure that they reduce the impact, but then they're also prepared to be able to recover and get back to their previous position as quickly as possible. The second problem that we have is who to give the cash to. So understanding that the need is great, but the resources are few, we really need to be focused in terms of who do we deliver the cash to make the greatest impact. In a lot of the developing country contexts, there's a dearth of information that allows us to be able to distinguish between those that are most vulnerable and therefore where cash will make the greatest impact. But we also have an opportunity with respect to the mobile phone revolution. We're seeing ever increasing uptake of use of mobile phones. And this is also generating a lot of data that can inform how we design social policies, including cash transfer programs. So working with researchers, we've been, and telcos and telco regulators, we've been able to use call detail records. So the way that you use your phone, who you call, when you call them, what services you use on the phone, whether it's SMS, what promotions you sign up for, allows us or allows AI to build a wealth profile for each and every individual that, when matched with other poverty data, is able to help us to distinguish who is poor and who's not poor just from analyzing mobile phone usage. Using this, we reduce the amount of time that it takes for us to actually identify who needs the cash, and enables us to be able to deliver this cash much more quickly than we've been able to do before, and much more accurately, and therefore allowing the funds that are made available for responding to disasters to be able to stretch so much further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having this interesting discussion. My name is Carolina. I am from the Global Methane Hub, which is a philanthropic effort to support countries and different organizations to reduce methane emission in a short-term period by 2030. I'm the program director for waste and circular economy, and previously I was the head of climate change at the Ministry of Environment in Chile. And why are we talking about methane? Because methane is a short-lived climate pollutant that has contributed to 45% of recent net global warming. And based on the last studies and information, reducing methane is the most cost-effective way of reducing global warming in the short and medium-term period in order to reach the Paris Agreement goal, talking about 2 degrees, right? Because 1.5, we are already there. And if we look at the methane emissions, we have that 35% is from the energy sector and 60% comes from the food production and the food waste. And of course, today I'm going to talk a little bit about waste. But before that, and talking about methane, it is important to realize that we are having right now a new era of methane accountability. Methane is, we can monitor methane from satellites, and we have really good information that it's public information that it's available. We have the Carbon Mapper satellite, DHG satellite, and so on that are working at facility level from identification. And we also have the Methane Sat, which is working at regional level emissions quantification. So we are in front of a great opportunity because we have methane emissions point source from the oil and gas sector and the landfill sector. And that's what we are going to talk about, waste. And why? Because in the US, for example, 50% of the landfills had observable emissions compared to only 1% of super-emitter sites in the oil and gas sector. So we do have a great opportunity. And what we are working in a great partnership with Google.org and RMI, CATF, Carbon Mapper, DHGSat, etc., is in making this data available and go into action. So last COP, we launched the Waste Map, which is a waste methane assessment platform with information regarding remote sense data from landfills emissions, like the plumes from the landfills, and also the inventories at national and subnational levels. So I'm going to discuss that in a little bit.
Wow, it's so inspiring to hear all of the work that you're all doing. Of course, I'm familiar with it already, but just incredible to hear on this stage. So hi, everyone. I'm Kevin from Google.org. For those of you that were here in the earlier session, you heard a lot of talk about the opportunity with AI. And I think when I think about this opportunity, especially in the climate space and the things that AI is good at, which is organizing vast quantities of data and making sense of it, thinking about ways to optimize processes and decisions, and of course, thinking about prediction. There's so many applications across climate, and not just from a mitigation standpoint, but also thinking about adaptation and nature and so many of the things that we're all here trying to fight for and preserve. Not all of the tools that are necessary in these fights are commercial. And in fact, many of these are best served as digital public open goods, things that are open sourced, that others can build off of, so that the work that these organizations are doing are able to be built off by researchers, by governments, by activists, by people that are most affected by this and don't live behind paywalls. So that's where we come in. So we are Google.org. We're the philanthropic arm of Google. And what we do is we look for these incredible nonprofits like you see on the stage today that have an ambition, have a subject matter expertise, and a willingness and an idea to try something innovative and try something big, with the idea of trying to create a product that can be for all. And what we do is provide funding and a strategic package of support. And the way I say this is we try to bring the best of what Google has to offer. So that's our products, that's our people, and all of the things that we can do to support the work that these organizations are doing.
And I think if we've learned one thing is COP30, we do this for twice as long, right? Or we get an hour with each of you and a microphone. We have been told we've got a hard stop, so I'm going to issue you all with a challenge. You've got about 2 minutes each for the next question that I'm going to ask you. Michael, can you help us zoom out a little bit? So where does all this incredible AI for climate adaptation and mitigation work fit into the slightly broader climate policy, investment and evidence-based tools landscape?
Great. So again, we have a lot of critical decisions that are interconnected to each other. One, and this is what we're here for, we're negotiating for better policy. The NDCs that are being revised right now need to be translated and implemented in national and then subnational policy. The ability to understand and race to the, it's not the top anymore, it's race to the wherever we can get to as fast as we can get there, needs to happen. And that means a lot of very technical and interoperable decisions. That is transportation and industry and agriculture and energy efficiency and all of those things, and nature and health and human rights. And it's a very small number of people who are tasked with these decisions. They're often parliamentarians and civil servants who need to figure this out very quickly. Number two is all the people who are holding those people to account. All those people who are holding these people to account are presumably many of you, civil society, presumably people who are, again, in the legal action. Only yesterday or only this week, Shell was in the courts for violation of human rights simply by digging for oil. How do we understand, how do we translate the scientific evidence, which is lots of publications? How do we translate the legal evidence, literature? How do we translate all of those things into what enables people to then go and say, do this or don't do that? And finally, through a risk perspective, investment, lending, and insurance are what powers the private sector and what powers investment and what powers the shift from the old economy to the new economy. If we don't understand risk, and risk is, what is the physical risk? How does that translate into what a company is worth and where should you be putting your money? What should you be insuring? Who should you be lending to? What is the liability risk? Is there a fiduciary responsibility on investors or insurers to make sure that they're invested in climate positive decisions? Or what happens if they're not? And what about banking? All of those decisions see people needing to ingest a lot of information. So both the ability to ask, what is the science, how does it translate into policy, and the ability to synthesize and absorb and be able to make a decision. Because when we don't have that ability at our fingertips, we are stuck with a status quo bias. And that is the most dangerous thing, because the status quo is really not where we want to be.
Thank you, that's perfect. Elchin, communicating scientific information, as Michael has said, is so important. How has AI changed how you and your team communicate about your discoveries, especially with those people who are not deeply in your field?
Yeah, I'll just say whatever Dr. Nachani said. That was perfect. I mean, it's really hard to, add anything on top of that. But I agree, like bringing a lot of diverse data together and then analyzing it and then having sort of this pipeline that, would sort of get all this data and put it all together so that we can, make a decision based on that, based on a lot of evidences. I mean, that would be awesome to have. And I wish I could say that we are there. Unfortunately, I think there is a long way to go. And because the diversity of the data, ontology of the data, it's really hard to do because there's a lot of sort of frictions along the way. We have to standardize the data. We have to fill the gaps in the data. And all these processes add some biases, and then how we have to complement the data. Like in our case, we don't have a lot of data, so we're going to complement that with the models, but the models are described these somewhat, simplified physics, if you will, right? Then, that's additional sort of bias coming in. And then the goal is basically on our side as a scientist to give most unbiased information to the public, to the policymaker, and that's sort of our priority. But in order to get there, first we need a lot of data, and we need to complement that data with additional data sources like modeling, like satellites, like stories from different people, scientific publications, and then how to bring all this data together. I'm gonna leave you guys with that. So hopefully next COP you will resolve it and get back to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Elchin. I mean, you made an interesting point there about different contexts and local stories. And Tom, you've told us that you work across 10 different countries in Africa, plus Bangladesh, plus the USA. So across those different contexts, what is needed to scale AI-driven solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation in such different contexts?
I think when I was coming, I had the story of bridging the digital divide. And yesterday, I heard a new word, which I'm embarrassed to say it was the first time I heard it, which is AI equity, which I think is a different way of saying the same thing. I think in terms of scaling AI is not an issue in some of the markets where we work. In the US, I think there are very clear use cases and clear demand, even from the public sector in terms of how to use it. In some of the other countries that we work in, that's not the case. And I think this is where we need to leverage partnerships, because what we have is a public sector that is holding the problem. We have nonprofits like Give Directly that have innovative ideas, but have the luxury of choosing when, where, and how to operate, something that the public sector and governments do not have. And then you have a private sector that has got the data, the infrastructure, the knowledge, and bringing these three things together is what allows us to scale. So how does the digital divide manifest itself in the space in which we work? One is having a public sector that is aware of the potential for AI to solve their problems. So how do we work together to co-create solutions that speak to the problems that they want to solve? The example I gave, when to deliver cash, whom to give it to, given the limitations of resources. The second thing is issues of infrastructure, physical, regulatory. How do we work together in terms of making sure that we understand the risks around AI? We also understand the concerns that public sector and also the public that we're trying to serve have around AI and how the data is used and what it means for them beyond the service that we're delivering. And then the third part is making sure that we are all in the same boat. So the level of technical understanding and expertise that is there. So some of the things that we need to deal with as we're thinking about scale is, one, co-creating, two, building capacity across those three domains through sharing data, conducting joint research, and also implementing AI projects together in the way that, for example, we've been working with Google AI across these different contexts. And the last part is also finding ways of de-risking the new tools for public application. One of the things that governments, politicians are afraid of is adopting something new that doesn't work. And the government infrastructure is very slow. Therefore, having sandboxes that where we can actually demonstrate effectiveness is where nonprofits like Give Directly can come in, demonstrate effectiveness, and also together with government find ways of how to actually integrate these into public service delivery systems and scale. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And you've teed me up perfectly for my question to Carolina, which is exactly that AI can only be as good as the people who are skilled in working with it. And so, Carolina, I know you've been doing a little bit of work with national and subnational actors to translate the insights from Waste Map into action. Can you tell us a bit more about how you're getting on with that?
Yes, thank you. And it was great introduction, by the way. Yes, exactly what we are doing with this waste map. It is this open source platform to support national and subnational governments, as you were saying, in order to work from data to action. And in order to do that, last COP, we launched a Lowering Organic Waste Methane Partnership, which is a partnership, right? A collaboration in between national and subnational governments and also different organizations, right? So we are working on data. We have the waste map with great information in order to improve inventories and to support policy decision makers, and also to improve regulation and different incentives. But what it's really important here is if we talk about data to action, we need to talk also about finance, right? So in this partnership, we do have the MDBs and different financial institutions that are using this type of data and platforms in order to support the implementation of the projects. And let me share with you one example, right? For example, we have the Inter-American Development Bank. They launched this Too Good to Waste initiative. Sorry, a lot of names, but it is what it is. It is COP, right? And with this Too Good to Waste initiative, they committed their waste portfolio to have a 30% of methane mitigation target. So what it means is that the work that they are doing in different countries, it is going to have this KPI. And how they are using this information, for example, they are supporting the national government in Dominican Republic to close the biggest dam site in Latin America, which is called La Duquesa, right? And the information that they are using regarding methane emissions is from the waste map and satellite data, right? To complement, of course, the inventories and the information that they do have on ground. So this is what we need to promote and improve in order to talk about data to action. And that's why this type of collaborations and the support that we are receiving from Google, it's so important, right? Because we can go and show this type of examples to other countries in Latin America and in Africa and also in Asia. We are working with Nigeria, with Ghana, with Senegal, with India, Mexico, the US, Brazil, etc. So I hope that for the next COP, the Latin American COP, we will have a good leadership from Latin America on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin, as you said before, Google.org, it's not just a philanthropic funder, it's embedded within one of the world's leading tech companies. How do you support nonprofits in their use of tech? And really, with only 2 minutes, what lessons can other funders and companies draw from this? No pressure.
Okay, rapid fire. Yeah, so I think it's important to start with the fact that financing is incredibly important. If we look at the world of philanthropy, only 2% of philanthropy goes to climate and nature, which is an incredible dearth of funds for the size of the problems that we have. And a very small fraction of that is going to tech-focused philanthropy. However, when we think about and talk to many of our partners, and I'd be curious if any of you would agree with this, sometimes the more valuable things that we can offer are not just our funds, but the things that we have within our own organization. So we have a couple of programs that look for ways to really structure this. One of these is called the Google.org Fellowship Program, where we will pull a team of Google employees off their day jobs for 6 months and embed them directly inside of a nonprofit partner. Together, they will and work on a product together. The IP for that and the product will all live within the nonprofit partner in the end. But together, by bringing in the skills that we bring as a technology company in with the subject matter expertise that these partners have, we can really accelerate the progress on these projects. And that's something we were very fortunate to do with the Woodwell team on permafrost. There's lots of other programs that we do, including one that we did with Climate Policy Radar, which we call the Generative AI Accelerator, where we try to guide a cohort of 20 organizations through the tools and skills that they'll need and the mentors to be able to really take advantage of this big generative AI opportunity. So that's maybe a lesson that I would leave with folks is you're thinking about ways to support organizations that are really doing great work. You know, as Tom said, it's not just about funding, it's about partnerships and trying to think about how you can really see each other for what you're trying to achieve and bring the best of what you have.
Now, I am very mindful of time, but I want to see if I can sneak in one final question to you all. Am I allowed one more little question? No. All right, not our day-to-day team, but those were fantastic answers. Thank you so much. I certainly wish, and I hope that next year we all have more time together. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you to the organisers for the event today, and give a round of applause to our wonderful panel. Thank you.